did a video where it was called "This Action Annoys All Women," and I talked about how a major action that most guys are doing in their conversation is interrupting women. Like, women are trying to talk, and then guys are just jumping in, right? So I did the video like years ago. It's only got like 148 views on it, but a woman commented on it recently, and she left this comment. She said, "Thank you. As a woman, I can confirm that communicating with men is definitely annoying. I remember dating a guy who would talk a lot, and I would wait until he stopped talking because I hate interrupting, and I want the other person to know that I'm actively listening. But with this dude, 20 minutes would go by, and he wouldn't stop talking. I once brought this up, and he said he was waiting for me to interrupt." Interrupt? What happened to listening? "I've experienced this over and over with many men. It's annoying as F. This happens way less with women." So, because she pointed this out, it's partially addressing her, but also partially addressing you guys as well. Because this is the thing, right? She says, "I've experienced this over and over with many men," which means this is a habit that, unbeknownst to you, you may also be doing. Now, this is important to point out because in that show, I talked about how, men are constantly interrupting women. This is a woman saying, "I'm trying to sit there and listen to him, but at no time is he pausing to let me talk. At no time is he asking me questions to let me talk. What the heck's going on?" And I find that very fascinating because as a guy that grew up around women, I learned how to communicate the way most women do, which is that in women's circles, when they're talking to each other, one woman talks, the other people attentively listen. At some point, that woman knows when it's her time to stop talking to allow somebody else to talk. So she'll stop, and then another woman will jump in, and they'll all listen to her. She'll talk a little bit. She knows when to stop talking to allow another person. So women's conversation tends to be like, we're talking, but we're talking because we want to give all of our attention to the person that's talking because we want to make sure that they're heard. But this other person, being a woman, knows that we all also want to talk. So she's going to know when to give up her time talking to allow us to talk also. So we all feel like we have an even level of talking going on, and nobody feels unheard or that they talk any less than somebody else, right? That's how women talk. How do guys talk? I found when I started trying to make more guy friends, the most annoying thing to me was that I would try to start talking and a guy would interrupt my story. I'd be getting out a thought and a guy would interject with his own thought. And I found this to be very, very annoying. But again, I didn't grow up around a lot of guys. So I'm just thinking they're being rude. And then I had to start studying male and female communication. And I realized, oh, this is just what guys do. Like, guys are just naturally jumping in and talking over one another and whatever in conversation. And I find it frustrating, but like that seems to be the norm here. And you know me, when something happens like that, I want to know what's the cause behind that, right? So I did a deep dive. So I want to talk to you guys about why it is that guys typically have a method of talking in terms of interrupting that women find annoying, and then give you the knowledge of that so you'll know why not to do it, right? So let's talk about what the purpose is for communication amongst women and communication amongst men. So stereotypically, women are communicating and they're talking and they're doing what's called active listening. They're communicating with the intent of really hearing what the other person is saying, which means in order to hear them and fully take in what the other person is saying, they can't talk. They have to be knowledgeable. They have to be able to understand what this person is saying so they can possibly give their 2 cents about what this other person is saying. And then it's an even exchange, right? So that causes them to sit there and just listen. And when they're talking amongst other women, they know at some point this other woman's going to realize it's 2 of us here. She's going to stop and let me say some stuff and get my thoughts about it out. And it's going to be a great exchange, right? So that's the intent behind women's communication. But what is the intent behind men's communication? Well, here's the thing, guy, is that, and this is what I had to learn too, right? Is that men are communicating a couple of different things. For one, they're using communication as a means to show their dominance. They're using communication as a means to show their assertiveness. And they're using communication as a means to display facts, okay? So in terms of displaying communication as a means of dominance, usually in a conversation, if there's like 3 or 4 men talking, right? Each guy there is usually trying to take over the conversation. And they're doing it by, being extra loud, or if a guy's talking, the other guy's going to try to interject their point more, as a means of showing that, hey, I'm the one that's leading this conversation, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is assertiveness. Each guy is trying to interject as a means of showing, hey, this is all subconscious stuff. Hey, I'm an assertive guy, and I have a point. I'm going to just put it in there. I'm going to just talk about it. I don't need to wait for somebody to tell me I need to wait for somebody to let me get in there. I'm going to just let myself in, right? And then the third thing is facts. Each guy in the conversation is trying to show that they either have the same knowledge or more knowledge as the other guy in the conversation. This is why, if you've noticed amongst guys, let's say you're talking about something, right? Like, I'll talk about Zelda. I recently beat Legend of Zelda, right? So I'd be like, so then I was playing Zelda and I found this treasure chest that had this secret sword in it that allowed me to do X, Y, and Z. Before I even finished, other guy, oh, that's awesome. Speaking of your thing, I also found that this other sword that's more powerful than the one you found is going to actually allow me to cause the wind to blow up and start fires and stuff. Then that's the other guy. Oh, that's awesome. Speaking of that flame, I did this other thing, blah, 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 blah. And it just goes back and forth about facts, right? So all these things translate to men are ultimately communicating as a means of trying to display their masculinity. Like, you're trying to show dominance, which shows that you are powerful enough to control a situation. You're displaying assertiveness, which shows that you're willing to push in and get what you want. And you're showing facts, which means that you are a knowledgeable guy that has lots of facts that these other guys probably don't know. Or if you have a guy that's more knowledgeable, then you're going to sit there and try to get facts from him, but you're still going to be interrupting him in the process, asking questions or whatever, And so men and women are communicating for two completely different reasons, right? And this all goes back to these are things that we just learned over time. Women are socialized to really share the conversation more and to sit and listen, and men are encouraged to go after what they want, to be dominant, to be leading, and all these things correlate to how they also are in conversation, right? Now, neither of these things are good or bad, because amongst our own sexes, this is how we operate. You have to know how to operate in order to be most effective. So that's how you operate. So here's where the problem lies, right? Is that there's nothing wrong with these modes of conversation, except for because as kids, we're mostly probably going to be around our kind. So we start to pick up the habits of how our communication should be. So what happens when men are with men is that they learn over time, from young boys to manhood, that the way you communicate as a means of showing that you're interacting with a conversation is to constantly interrupt. Because if you're interrupting the conversation, you are taking part in it. You're fully showing that you're invested by actually interrupting amongst other men. And with women, you show you're being respectful and caring for the other person's thoughts by sitting there and listening. So here's where the clash happens. Man and women get together, right? So let's take her situation, right? She's on dates and she's sitting there and the guy starts talking. Now, the woman's sitting there thinking, okay, he's talking. This is great. I'm getting to learn more about him. But at some point, he's going to recognize that there's two people here and that I want to talk as well. So I'll just sit here and wait for him to stop talking so I can interject my thoughts. And 20 minutes later, he's still talking. And now she's like, he didn't stop. Oh, this guy only cares about himself. He's only thinking about what he wants. And his story is so interesting. He doesn't even care to get to know me. That's her experience. But what is the guy experiencing? Well, as a guy, you're experiencing the following, right? You're sitting there and you're talking and you're talking and you're talking. You're thinking in your head, man, I'm talking. I guess she likes what I'm saying because I'm interesting. But at some point, she probably has something to add to what I'm saying. So if she does have something interesting, she'll just start saying it. Like, I don't have to invite her into the conversation. She can just start talking and I'll be fine. At the point that she starts talking, I'll be fine to just shut up while she starts talking. She'll talk for a little bit. And then at the point where I hear something that I can grab onto, I'll interrupt her and start talking. And that'll be the conversation. So this guy's talking for 20 minutes, not because he wants to talk for 20 minutes, but because in his head, he's thinking if she wants to contribute to the conversation, she knows to interrupt, right? And this is where the clash happens, because he's sitting there thinking if she was interested, she'd interrupt and I'd be happy to hear her. But if she doesn't interrupt, I'll just keep talking because she must think I'm just that fascinating. And the woman's sitting there thinking, he's not interested in me. He only cares about himself. This date's a dud. I'm going to go home and never contact him again because he doesn't know about me anyway. So what does he care? And then so many guys are like, and because I get these comments a lot from guys, we had such a great first date. I thought we really had a connection. But then when I asked her out again, she was too busy or said we didn't connect, but I thought we did. And guys are understanding that part of it could very well be that you had a good time because you thought that by her listening all the time that she was really into you. And in the process, she didn't get to have as good of a time because she didn't talk about herself. She didn't feel like she could interrupt you, so she didn't. And therefore, she had a bad time. And so this is where this happens because unfortunately, there are women that you're losing simply because you're not aware that when you're talking nonstop, that you're thinking she's going to interrupt, and you're not aware that because of how she was grown up and raised, that she's not going to. She's looking for you to communicate in the way that she's used to with women, which is that you're going to be kind enough to eventually stop and ask her a question and let her talk. Especially girls that are the so-called nice girls, that so-called want allegedly nice guys. They're going to be the ones that are mostly going to do this. Like the really, really nice, authentically nice girls that want a good guy are going to communicate just like this woman. They're going to sit there and be kind and patient and just wait for you to, with their batty eyes, to just stop, to shut the heck up and let her talk. And she's not aware that you're thinking she can just interrupt at any time because that doesn't feel comfortable for her. It does not feel comfortable for her to interrupt you because in her world, it's very rude. Other women will chastise her for it and possibly banish her from the group for being too talky or thinking her ideas are so much better than mine and blah, 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 that she's not going to risk doing that on a date. So what she's going to do is do what she's been trained to do, which is to sit there and listen and wait for you to stop talking. And so I found it fascinating that she pointed out that guys, time and time again, do this on date after date. They get her on a date and they just talk. And she's like, why won't they stop? And so this is an example of, this is knowledge that you as a guy need to have in the back of your head. When you go out on dates and you start talking, you cannot expect her to interrupt you when you're talking or to say, hey, could you ask me a question, blah, 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 because especially women that are really nice, aren't going to do this. What they're going to do is hope that you stop. So here's what I found worked for me going on dates. Again, the advantage of me growing up around women is that I got to see the pain in women's eyes of like, I really like this guy, but he just talks so much and didn't ask me about me and I got turned off, right? So now that you have this knowledge, when you go on dates, be mindful that for some of those initial dates, you're going to have to get her out of the habit of thinking that you just want to talk, or that you don't care about what she has to say. And that means you're going to have to go into these situations asking her questions. Yes, because I know it feels weird, guys, but of the two of you, you could stand to put the what's it called, like the olive branch forward early by talking less for one and asking her questions. So here's how I work my program, right? For one, on dates, I found that I keep my talking rate when I'm talking about myself to no longer than 45 seconds. If she asks me about myself, I will talk for a maximum of 45 seconds before I turn it around and ask her a question or stop and pause to let her interject, all right? I found keeping that 45-second ratio allows me to not look like I'm taking over the conversation. And I found just by that exercise alone, women typically appreciate the fact that I'm not overtaking the conversation because they want to hear about me, but they don't want to have me taking over the entire conversation, right? So then the second part is you have to be mindful that amongst men, I find that when men talk with each other, they don't usually ask other guys questions. Like, because guys just somehow know to continue a conversation. Like if I'm talking with a buddy of mine, right? If I'm talking about, let's say I'm talking about, go back to Zelda, right? If I just say like, yeah, man, like that I played Zelda, man, it was really hard trying to beat Ganon. The other guy just knows to continue the conversation. Yeah, man, I had a hard time too, blah, 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 blah. I didn't have to say, man, I had a hard time fighting Ganon. Did you have a hard time fighting Ganon? Like, I don't have to ask that question to guys. It's implied. But for women, I find that you just ending a sentence isn't going to always make her think that you want her to now talk. So that means you're going to say things like, I had a hard time beating Ganon. But what do you think? Was it hard for you to beat Ganon? Or let's not use the video game example, right? You're on a date. She asks you about your job. Man, I work at a call center. I work at a call center and, it's an okay job. It's just, a lot of people, I call them. Some people aren't home. Some people hang up on me. Like, it's a really, really hard job. Now with the guy, you could just stop right there, right? And he would just take the conversation. Can't do that. So you go back to, yeah, it's a really hard job. But what about your job? Like, do you like your job? Do you have a good time at your job? Like, you have to legitimately say your thing about yourself and then ask her a question, because that's going to let her know, oh, it's my turn to talk. And it's going to make her feel like, oh my God, he actually wants to get to know me. Like he's legitimately asking me questions about myself, which means that he wants to get to know me. He's not just, I don't have to worry about if I say a thing, does he care or not? Because by you asking the question, it's going to make her feel as though you actually want to get to know the answer. Versus if you do like we do with guys, oh, y'all go to the call center and, it's just kind of weird sometimes. Like that ending right there is going to make her think, so do I continue the conversation? Does he want me to talk about him some more or do a follow-up question to what he said? Or does he want me to talk about me? Like, I don't know where to go here. So your job in the conversation is to basically guide her where you want it to go by asking her questions, if talking about yourself, and then ask a follow-up question with that. Or when she talks about herself, you ask her a follow-up question to what she said. But yeah, you want to keep your talking to 45 seconds and you want to be mindful that she is not going to interrupt you, guy. Like she's not. Like most women, if they're nice and cordial, as much as you're thinking, I could just be able to say a thing, she just interrupt, it's not going to happen. So you could be mad about that and be like, she should communicate like me and it not happen. Or you can say, you know what, olive branch. I'm going to start asking questions and I'm going to keep my answers a little bit shorter than I normally would. But I'm going to make her feel like she's part of this conversation, because I'm telling you guys, some of you guys are losing women simply because you're going nonstop talking and you're doing it thinking, hey, I want to give this girl my life story. I want her to know all about me, and this is the best way to do it. And hopefully she'll ask follow-ups, but I'm going to just keep talking and talking and talking. And you're not seeing anything wrong with it. And women aren't going to tell you that something's wrong. All they're going to think is, this guy, I'm judging him right now because he's not letting me talk. He's still talking. It's really rude. Oh my God, I feel some kind of way. What's this about? And a lot of times, again, I tell you guys, show up the show, I study this stuff. So that's why I know this. Most women are not studying what attracts them and what doesn't attract them. All they know is that you do a thing as a guy, they feel the ick, and then they go away. So they're not going to be aware of like, why is it that this guy won't stop talking? They're not researching, oh, guys talk a lot because that's how they talk amongst guys, so I need to understand that. All they're going to know is, I'm coming to this date. I thought I'd be having a good time. He's talking all about himself. He's not asking me any questions, and I don't know why, and I'm out. And so I don't want you to be out. I want you to understand what women are going through and understand that when they're not interrupting you, that it's not because they're not interested in your conversations, because they're hoping that you as the guy are going to ask them questions, which will let them know that they'll let them feel as though you want to actually get to know them. All right. So do that. That's a simple note. Just follow what I just said. And then hopefully if you come across this woman, you'll be able to give her a good dating experience. You's a bad boy, but you can't stop, won't stop. You a high earning, high value, high class man. You a high earning, high value, high class man. You a high earning, high value, high class man. You a high class man. You a high class man. You a high earning, high value, high class.